Alright, so CD Projekt Red has finally given us details on the future of Cyberpunk 2077 with not only upcoming major overhauls to the game, but also the Phantom Liberty expansion teaser trailer, which we'll briefly be covering in this video, but saving the analysis for the next video, as it's a very deep dive. There's an overwhelming amount of information once again to digest in this video, so as always, the entire video will be timestamped so you can jump around as you please. So, without further ado, let's roll the intro. Alright, so CD Projekt Red didn't just stop at patch 1.6 and improve modding tools, which we discussed in detail in the previous video, where I showcased the major new features included in the update, which has given a decent amount of life back to the community with a 24-hour peak player count of 26,000 players on Steam, which for a single-player game that didn't really add any new content with this update, I'd say that's pretty impressive. Now, the biggest news I think I need to mention before we go ahead and jump into the future of the game, as this is going to negatively affect a good number of people. That being, everything after patch 1.6 will unfortunately not be coming to the previous generation of consoles. This includes all future updates, free DLCs, and the expansion coming in 2023. And just as an explanation, this is due to unfortunate technical limitations and the same reason the game shouldn't have released on those platforms to begin with. It's unfortunate news for many, and I definitely understand the disappointment or anger, especially with the cost and availability of next-gen hardware, but this is unfortunately the necessary decision for the betterment of the game and future content. It's just unfortunate that some are going to miss out because of this. And while this is bad news for people stuck on those platforms, this is actually very good news for anyone on PC or the current generation of consoles, as it should hopefully mean the removal of any kind of restrictions on content additions and potentially even speeding up the development for things that are actively working on. The reason I say that is they will no longer have to work within the technical limitations of the hardware, which, if we're all honest, is quite ancient at this point. So the game has been heavily restricted on memory bandwidth, asset loading, and so on. We're talking about platforms that released nearly 10 years ago and had outdated hardware when they released to begin with, so the game shouldn't have released on those platforms in the first place. And that was certainly on CD Projekt for pushing that on the developers. But to keep this game moving forward, those platforms really do need to be cut. It's a development and logistical nightmare to keep supporting them at this point, as the game is already unstable on previous gen, and adding an all new district with the expansion and more advanced AI systems, for example, is beyond what they're realistically capable of. Now, this does affect one group of people more than others, as the Xbox One X Cyberpunk 2077 limited edition bundle did promise that the first expansion would be included. So CD Projekt Red did note that owners of that edition will receive a reimbursement for the expansion in the form of Microsoft Store credits. So be sure to keep a lookout on that information if it applies to you. I'd imagine it will be at least close to the value of the expansion. So if you say upgrade to a new Xbox Series console, you'd hopefully be able to buy the expansion for the game if you wanted to, or spend it on whatever else you want. Of course, they're legally obligated to do something like this, so this isn't really out of the kindness of their heart situation. That said, I am glad that this information came alongside the announcement and wasn't some sort of afterthought. I'd love to hear in the comments if them not bringing it to previous gen affects any of you that are watching this video, and whether or not you're understanding of this situation, because I can't imagine it was a very easy decision for CD Projekt. It's essentially lost customers for them and another thing to get people upset. So that tells you just how unrealistic supporting those platforms was moving forward. Now, with that out of the way, what can everyone else look forward to for the future of the game? Well, they confirmed that they're overhauling a number of systems to lay the groundwork for the future of the game and additional content. And while we didn't get a gameplay look at any of this, as this is just teased info from them, these are all very needed overhauls and reworks to improve the overall experience of the game, and all of these things have been highly requested as well. The first of which is the completely reworked NCPD system, which, while we don't have a lot to go off of, I'd imagine this will consist of NCPD being a part of traffic for one, actually chasing after you in vehicles, which we'll get more into later, proper and more immersive notoriety escalation, as they did mention that we need to watch out for max tac with this new overhaul, so that means there is some form of change on how max tac behaves in the game. It could be the way that they're deployed, such as a dropship AV as seen during Act 1, their arsenal being buffed, or something in between. As to whether this will include things like bribing the NCPD or any missions to tie in with it, that is unknown as well, but I do look forward to see how this will change the overall feel of the game. They said it really changes how the game world feels, so I am interested to see just how detailed the rework is. The NCPD rework is also said to be tied with another major rework to a system that was actually cut from the game, that being vehicle-to-vehicle combat, which yes, is coming in a future update alongside the NCPD overhaul, and this has been a highly requested feature, and I'd imagine we'll get a full rework of how the cut version behaves, which is mostly useless as it's only in first person with no autopilot or targeting system, so it's pretty janky. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how this plays out. I'd imagine with them going through all the work to overhaul the NCPD and add vehicle-to-vehicle combat, that we'll also see similar changes to the gangs of Night City, as to add more purpose to the vehicle-to-vehicle combat rather than just fighting the NCPD. There's a load of potential for these two reworks, but of course, without any gameplay to show it off or truly detailed information, we'll have to see it to believe it. And that's not it for upcoming major overhauls though, as they also mentioned that there will be an all-new gameplay loop for Melee, but what that actually consists of, we don't know. I'd imagine it consists of a more fleshed out and dynamic melee combat, either through unique abilities for weapon types or new perks. Again, the melee is a pretty weak point in the game, so it's great to hear that it's being worked on. They're also working on all new player actions in the perk tree, which seems to imply stuff like new movement as an example, but whether this will result in a very highly demanded cut feature, that being wall running, only time will tell. But if they could pull something like that off in the game, I think it would earn them a lot of goodwill, as I feel like that was one of the most prominent cut features that people discussed ahead of launch. And then there was what they said will be more cyberware feeling cyberware. And that is the most vague thing they could have possibly said, but this could mean a few things. One example being actual visual changes to your character when applying cyberware at a Ripper dock, which is something a lot of people have wanted to see. Of course, that's another visual appearance in a non-third person game, so there's going to be some people against that as well. Of course, please keep in mind that all of these overhauls are confirmed, but the speculation I'm talking about is just that, speculation. So remember to temper expectations and be pleasantly surprised if they meet or surpass them. With how good the implementation is for Transmog, it seems like they're truly taking their time when it comes to adding features, so I am looking forward to seeing how these overhauls actually impact the game. We also have to keep in mind that these are just the things that they've teased officially, and more than likely doesn't cover everything that they're working on. So there could very well be some even more advanced features in the works, but I think we should keep our focus on the things that are official. There are also two highly requested features that are very likely to come, one of which is confirmed, the other not so much, but I think it will eventually find its way into the game, even though there's been some discouraging comments out there. The first of which is FSR 2.0, that being AMD's DLSS equivalent, and while Miles Tost had said there was no news that they could share on Twitter the other day, AMD did follow that up with a large blog post on FSR 2.1 and upcoming games with FSR 2.0 support, with Cyberpunk 2077 being one of them. So for anyone that can't utilize DLSS, FSR 2.0 is coming to save the day for Cyberpunk 2077, which you can technically mod into the game now anyways, but it's always best to get official support. Then there is one feature that is causing some severe frustration in the community, that being New Game Plus. As Miles Tost had quite a bit to say on why it hasn't been implemented in the game yet, but I think the most important takeaway from his tweets is that they're listening and investigating on adding it. For me, all I want to hear is that they're considering it and not an outright no, and that's what we got. So all we can do now is hope that they decide to add it in the future. And realistically, I wouldn't be surprised if they wait until the expansion, where they'll have already released major overhauls to improve the general gameplay experience, and then the large amount of new content with the expansion, giving people even more reason to play the game over and over with New Game Plus. And while these tweets could read like excuses, it can also be taken that they're just putting actual thoughts into how they would want to implement New Game Plus. But we'll just have to wait and see on whether it even gets added. Now, what about the expansion coming in 2023? Well, we not only got the name of the expansion, which is Phantom Liberty, but also a very solid teaser trailer that gives us both the vibe and feel for what's to come in this new spy thriller set in an all-new district of Night City. And as featured in the trailer, Keanu Reeves will be reprising his role as Johnny Silverhand, meaning this expansion will either take place during or after the events of the main game, which could even lead to a potential new ending. Throughout the trailer, we can see what seems to be conflict between the NUSA and Militech, with V taking an oath from who is believed to be the woman in the trailer, and Johnny not being so happy about it. There's quite a bit of tiny details in this trailer which are very easy to miss, which we'll be diving into during the trailer analysis video, which you'll understand why that video caused a bit of delay here on the channel soon. The trailer doesn't seem to show a whole lot when you just simply watch it, as it is a teaser after all, but from what is shown, I am looking forward to seeing what they do with it, as I love the story and characters in the base game. I'd say that is the strongest part of the game, so I cannot wait to experience more, especially when there is so much that they could do with this expansion. And they've made statements on this being a major expansion, since it's going to be the only one for the game, so we'll see just how that pans out and how large it is. Of course, I am staying cautiously optimistic, as while I enjoyed the base game myself, there is a lot of room for error with such a large expansion. So I've got my fingers crossed that the release goes smoothly whenever that will actually be. Now, if you'd like to know about the most prominent features and changes that were added into the game with the most recent update, you can check out that video on screen. But that's it for this video. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, this is Apoqsi, signing off.